and record the reading and the sermon for people to watch on YouTube who haven't been able to come at the time.
The reading is taken from Matthew, chapter 24, verse 43 onwards, and chapter 25, verses 1 to 30. This is page 914. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time," and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Chapter 25. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars, along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they're on their way to buy oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2, and to the other 1 bag, according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold bought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came forward. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will be given an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be God.
Well, good morning. I hope you can all hear me. I will assume that's a yes, so I will carry on. Well, it's very strange.
Nigel, but we can't hear you.
I am unmuted. Can you hear me now? Now, hello, testing. 1, 2, 3. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, good morning. It's very strange to be sitting in the study at my desk. It feels like it's Monday morning, but I would be a little bit concerned if Monday morning at 9:30 I started the sales meeting I normally attend with prepare for the reckoning. So I don't think I will do that tomorrow morning. But as we've heard, today is Advent Sunday, and the title for the sermon today is Prepare for the Reckoning. Now, one definition of this season of Advent is the purposeful season of waiting for the arrival of Christ. The purposeful season of waiting for the arrival of Christ. It's a time to prepare our hearts. Advent is a season for preparation and waiting. Firstly, to celebrate Christ's first arrival at Christmas, and secondly, to remind us to keep our hearts and minds prepared for Christ's second coming, when he will judge the living and the dead, the day of reckoning. I wonder what sorts of things, I was going to do this differently if I'd been in church, but what sorts of things do we do in the run-up to Christmas? Well, I've put some thoughts down on paper. We buy presents. And I don't know if any of you have family abroad. It's very difficult. My brother and his wife live in Lebanon, and we always have to think very far in advance about presents to get them out to Lebanon on time. Do you put up a tree? Do you decorate that tree? Do you go shopping for food? Make a list and go shopping. And then you prepare the food. And then you cook the food. And then you eat the food. And then for the next 2 weeks, you eat the leftovers of the food. Do you keep an Advent calendar? Why? Why do we prepare for Christmas? Why does the Advent calendar only go up to the 24th? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Because Christmas is coming. And we know it'll be on December the 25th. And so in the same way, as we spend these 4 weeks preparing to celebrate Christ's first Advent as a baby in Palestine 2,000 years ago, we should live our whole lives preparing for Christ's second coming. And if we're not doing so, there's only really 2 options. Either we don't believe Christ is returning, or we believe he is, but we don't care. And both are very dangerous positions to find ourselves in. I'm sure you've all heard of the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, Anthony Ashley Cooper. As a social reformer, he was called the poor man's Earl. He campaigned for better working conditions, reform to lunacy laws, education, and the limitations of child labor. An amazing Christian man. Why did he act like he did? Well, one reason can be found in a famous quote of his, and this is it. I do not think in the last 40 years I have lived one conscious hour that was not influenced by the thought of our Lord's return. I'll say that again. I do not think in the last 40 years I have lived one conscious hour that was not influenced by the thought of our Lord's return. What a wonderful example of how to live, waiting for Christ's second coming. So now to the immediate context of this passage. It occurs in the week after the triumphant entry into Jerusalem, in the run-up to Jesus' arrest on the Thursday and crucifixion on the Friday. He and his disciples had left the temple and they're on the Mount of Olives. I'm just going to read the first 3 verses of chapter 24, which form the context of 24 and 25. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? Jesus asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, so there must have been silence between leaving the temple and getting to the Mount of Olives. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And it's interesting that even now, photographs taken from the Mount of Olives, I think a photograph is going to come up on the screen, show that you can see directly across the valley from the Mount of Olives, you can see the Temple Mount. So even as they were on you can see the Dome of the Rock there in the distance. As they were sitting on the Mount of Olives, they were probably looking back at the temple and saying, Jesus, those words you said, what did you mean? And so on. So the passage we have had read to us today, and thank you for that, David, it's a continuation of Jesus's answer to that question of the disciples in verse 3 there. Tell us, when will the destruction of the temple happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And so I've got 3 points today about how we are to prepare for Christ's second coming as we prepare for celebrating his first coming. First point, be ready for the day of reckoning. He has promised he will return, and he doesn't lie. Secondly, be holy, set apart for God. And thirdly, and controversially possibly, be busy in doing God's work. I will qualify that last one when we get to it, so bear with me. Wouldn't it be great if we could be reminded of these 3 points every time we are doing something, however small, to prepare for Christmas this year, that we think of, be ready, be holy, be busy. And now to the passage itself. I'm going to read the first 3 verses that were read to us. I'm actually adding verse 42 onto it as well, so apologies for that. But here we go, the first 3 verses. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So I'm going to steal a few verses from last week's passage for context again, because verse 42 starts the word therefore. So let me just read verses 36 to 39. So if you've got your Bibles open, that would be great. Here we go, verse 36 from chapter 24. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. It's interesting, isn't it? Is Jesus saying that eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, are they bad things in and of themselves? Well, of course not. But if they're done without reference to God and what he has called us to, then yes, they can be bad things, because we're not living them out in the light of Christ's return. Similarly, is Jesus saying that we ought to all stay up all night? Let's take it in shifts. Annette'll stay up from 9 till 12. She'll then wake me up. I then stay up from 12 till 3. Is that what Jesus is saying? That Annette and I need to take it in shifts and stay up all night waiting for a thief? Of course not. But think of the metaphor. Think of the story. If I heard that a thief was planning to come and rob my house tonight, Sunday night, guess what I would do? I would stay up all night. And I assume you would too. So be ready. Christ has said he will return, and that means he will. And the question is, am I living my life in the light of that fact? Now, the second little story that Jesus tells to illustrate his point is of the servant that can either act wisely or foolishly. Please note that there are not two servants in this story. There is one servant who has the choice to act either way. I'll read it again. This is from verse 45. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked, and he says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Be ready for the day of reckoning. Jesus has promised he will return, and he doesn't lie. And the second point, be holy, be set apart for God. The master not only left, but he also gave his servant a job to do. Did you notice what the job was? Did anyone pick that up? Give them their food at the proper time. That was the job. Take care of God's household. The servants were to work because their master had told them to, and because he was returning. See, part of our preparation for Christ's second coming should be living holy lives, carrying out the tasks he has set us, obeying his commands to love one another, serve one another, feed one another. Now to the third small story. I'm sorry, I'm cantering through these a little bit, but they're wonderful stories. The parable of the 10 bridesmaids. I believe in the reading they were called virgins, but the connotation here is that they were bridesmaids. And I'm not going to read the whole story again. I hope you will remember it. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of time. But the idea here is that we're to be ready. These 10 bridesmaids, remember, what was the job of a bridesmaid back then? And this is quite important to understand. It was to prepare the bride for the bridegroom. Now, I'm not going to go into those connotations of the bride being the church and the bridegroom being Jesus himself, because I'm not sure that's quite what Jesus meant in this particular parable in the context within which it is given. But apparently in those days, not so much these days, but Annette and I used to go to some weddings of students down in Tyre, and the entrance of the bridegroom, each wedding was crazier than the last one. So you'd have literally the bridegroom and his followers coming in on white horses or brandishing swords and doing a dance. quite amazing. The entrance of the bridegroom was a massive thing. But apparently in Jesus's day, it was the fact that no one knew what time the bridegroom was arriving. And the idea was, it was the job of the bride and her entourage and her family to await the coming of the bridegroom. And if you weren't ready, it was seen as bad form. And so you've got these 10 bridesmaids, and only 5 thought ahead. Only 5 were prepared for the long haul, if you like. And the other 5, what were they thinking? They were thinking, okay, well, if the bridegroom comes back within a reasonable time, then fine. But listen, if not, then we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. That's quite scary, isn't it? Because there is no such thing. This parable is very clear. There's no such thing as crossing that bridge when we come to it, when it comes to being ready for Christ's return. Let me read verses 11 to 13 about the other 5 bridesmaids who were not ready. Later, the others also came. Lord, Lord, they said, open the door for us. But he replied, I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. Be ready. And now the last of the stories, the parable of the bags of gold, or the parable of the talents. Again, I'm not going to read it all because it's quite a long story and David read it so well. But I just wanted to show you an interesting slide. I think it's going to come up. I want to show you an image of a piece of stone they found many years ago. And they think that this piece of stone was used as the weight of measurement for a talent, or what's called here a bag. And it's interesting, isn't it, that it's bigger than I always thought it was. When I was a little child, I thought 5 bags of gold, or 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent, and I didn't think they would actually be that big. But in the story, the 1 talent here is equivalent to 6,000 denarii. 6,000. Now remember, a worker got 1 denarii for 1 day's work. And this 1 talent, one of these talents, was worth 6,000 denarii. And a talent was a unit of weight. It was 35 kilograms. So I've worked it out. If you happen to be given 35 kilograms of gold, guess how much that's worth? Well, yesterday. Today it may have gone up or down. 15 million pounds. Now, strictly speaking, though, it's better to consider that 6,000 denarii is actually more like being equivalent to about 200,000 pounds in today's money. Either way, 1 talent of gold was not an insignificant unit of money. Because let me let you into a secret. I haven't written this down, but between brackets, when I was a child, I actually thought this meant that the master was unfair to the servant who only got 1 talent. Because I thought, what's 1 talent? $10, £20? I don't know. That's not very fair. But when you think of it, what is it saying? The first servant got £1 million in today's money, the second £400,000, and the third £200,000. No one was actually shortchanged. We serve a generous master, but there's no doubt that people have different talents and different levels of talent. And yet we're all equally loved and valued by our Father in heaven. How do we know that? Well, it's illustrated, isn't it, by his reaction to the 2 servants who did return 100% return on his investment. Please note that the servant who returned 10 after having been given 5, and the servant who returned 4 after having been given 2, heard exactly the same words from their returning master. How many talents, bags of gold, do you think the master expected the 3rd servant to return? He gave him 1. How many do you think he expected to get back? 2, of course. 2 talents. If he had done so, that third servant, the master would have said exactly the same to him as he had said to the other two. But the third servant thought it better to bury the talents that he'd been given, because he had a misconception about the master, that instead of being honored to work for the master and better the master's investment, he was afraid that the master would punish him for trying in case he lost the one talent he had. How wrong he was. The master wanted the servants to work with what they had been given and produce fruit in keeping with what they had been given. Be busy in doing God's work. Now, please don't think that I'm saying that we have to be busy to earn our salvation. Of course not. Faith alone saves. But let me use one of Calvin's quotes. Faith alone saves, but the faith that saves is never alone. And you can read something similar in the letter of James. Jesus himself in Matthew 7 said, "By their fruits you will know them." The master is returning. There will be a day of reckoning. Be busy in doing God's work with the talents, money, time, skills, anything that he has given you. They are God's, and he expects a return. So, in summary, are you prepared for Christmas yet? Probably not, but by the 25th you'll be. And here's an even more important question. Are you prepared for the reckoning? And so I'll leave you with those 3 points again. Be ready for the day of reckoning. Jesus has promised he will return, and he doesn't lie. Be holy, be set apart for God, and be busy in doing God's work. Amen.